you so much for tuning in to Circling Dialogos and this ongoing series of Dialectic in the Dialogos practice sessions. So I'll set some context more about this series in a moment. First, some housekeeping. If you are interested in working one-on-one with me through consulting and coaching, go ahead and email me. My email is in the show notes below. What'll happen is we'll make an appointment on Zoom for a consultation, and we'll both co-explore if coaching with me is a fit for you right now and for us. Again, email's in the show notes. In terms of circling, you can find all the information about circling at the Circling Institute, institute.com. Link below. We have open events every Thursday. We have circling intensive weekends open to everybody every 4 to 6 weeks. And we have the Art of Circling practitioner training course, which is the year-long training. And that's still open for registration. However, it's closing soon. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and move quickly on that. All right. So this is a series where we are practicing the practice that was developed by John Vervaeke, Christopher, and myself, and many, many other people. It's the practice that we formally teach at the Circling into Dialogos weekend that we have done 3 of those so far. So I wanted to put this series on as a way of just diving deeper and exploring the practice and to fine-tune it and refine it. And so that's really the intention of this. And so far, we are learning so much, and much fine-tuning is happening, plus really realizing, I think all of us are really realizing the ongoing impact of this practice in our actual lives, our day-to-day lives. So as this series goes on, there's so many things that you can be tracking about this. On one level, new in modern practice. On another level, perhaps the most ancient Western practice at the core of intelligibility in the West. I think this practice really gets at. And I just want to remind everybody that this particular, that what we're demonstrating here is a practice that's really the end result of a culmination of a whole ecology of practices. So this is really an advanced practice. So be mindful of that and enjoy.
So I don't know if this totally reflects where we got last time, but what I wrote was, humility is the virtue that allows beings' natural and inevitable collapse to transform into awakened formlessness and thereby free the world from its attachment to form. Is that something like what we got to?
Could you just read it again a little bit, like maybe a little slower?
Yeah. Humility is the virtue that allows beings' natural and inevitable collapse to transform into awakened formlessness and thereby free the world from its attachment to form. So we were talking about the natural and inevitable collapse of being, and if we acknowledge that with humility, and as it is collapsing, adopt an attitude of humility, then there is room for transformation into formless consciousness, formless awareness. And if we do that, if we take that on and do that ourselves, then it has an effect on the world. And that is to release the world from its attachment to form in evolutionary terms. I don't know. That was my kind of take on it, Daniel. So I'd be interested to see what you're going to say.
That sounds very much like a kind of then humility is like the salvific or the virtue where we can salvifically transform or overcome the collapse of being into that beyond, that great beyond that is beyond all ontical determinations. That's kind of like that. That's what it, where it's pure formlessness. So like nirvana, like that, or heaven, or the beyond, just the beyond.
Yes. So that was where we got last time, Guy, after you left, and I was really surprised myself that we actually got into that myself. Mm-hmm.
What did surprise you?
What surprised me? It sort of put everything together. I mean, I sort of forgot that being naturally collapses. I forgot that, I mean, it's easy to forget. I mean, our life project is to try to forget that we're going to die.
Yeah.
Basically. But that's the way it is.
Yeah.
And it just really put together a bunch of it just sort of validated what I already knew, but was not actually bringing into this practice.
Yeah. Interesting.
And in the sense of the virtue of humility that is necessary. We were talking about it being the necessary piece to allow that transformation to happen.
Yeah. Death.
Surrendering in humility. And I think as I was listening to all the struggles that John was having with trying to figure this thing out, like I was thinking, wow, what about applying a virtue of humility? I don't know. Anyway, we were sort of coming from different places.
Now I'll share something, and I still don't understand this fully. So me and Tom, I don't know, you know him, both of you.
Thomas.
We talked. Yeah, Thomas.
Yeah.
We talked with Ivo De Gennaro on Sunday. We kind of somehow managed to do that. And he sent us, then after that, he sent us a piece from Henry Miller, and the word surrender was kind of what was most important there. Somehow, that is De Gennaro's suspicion. Surrendering helps us to favor the openness of being, a kind of utter humility that is also expressed, for example, in the religions. For example, think of Meister Eckhart, that kind of idea of releasement, letting go of everything, like even of God, letting go of everything, this kind of complete surrendering, complete relinquishing of everything. That somehow seems to favor the openness of being. Um, so that's why I liked what you had written, Sandra, and shared with
And
us.
that openness of being allows the world itself to come into greater openness.
Yes.
The you didn't record that, did you? With Eva? You didn't
Daniel,
record it, did you?
yeah, it's too bad.
Right. I want to get him. I want to talk with him as well. That's really cool. It's interesting. What would be? I thought I've had this thought just in terms of the kind of the cadence of what we're doing here and doing this is this interplay that's already been happening, right, between something like the philosophical reflection practice, right, or philosophical fellowship practice, right, and the dialectic and the dialogos. And it's interesting because it sounds like what you just wrote would be something that we can actually put into philosophical fellowship, right? And go around and and grok it more, and then from there take that as the first proposition that we then go into dialogos with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Next one, mm-hmm. because then it makes see if we take that proposition that you wrote out, right, and we ask ourselves, okay, what does the author intend here? And we ask ourselves, who is the author? This is where it gets really interesting, right? Like, like it's
who was that who wrote that? Yeah, because that's very interesting. Yeah, there is no author. There is no single author. That's for sure.
Totally.
Yeah,
it's not reducible down to the subjectivity of the three of us. You can't even say it's a combination of the three of us, right? Like,
no,
it's like, no. In fact, we're kind of in the process of doing our best to get out of the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And doing a bad job of it sometimes, I think, for me anyway.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The funny thing is also that the current academic industry is kind of like the complete opposite. It's kind of like you really fight that. Oh, I had the insight. I have to be acknowledged for having this. Like right in the medieval world, for example, that it didn't even. They often were just writing anonymously and not. Because it was all for the favor of God or so.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I have the insight, who cares?
Right. Totally.
Yeah. And I also want to say that part of what I feel is present, at least for me, is here I am. I'm going to talk about it again because I really seem to have to go to the cathedral every day and sit and do my Buddhist practice, do my Huato practice, which is what I seem to have to do that still. And there's something about that I need to point to and say, this is also here, present. Yeah. I have to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, totally. Because in some sense, it arose. It also, you doing that kind of arose somehow in connection with all of this.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
It's been the central topic of a lot of our discussions.
Yeah. And despite all my, my difficulties with the doctrine and I'm not part of that and all that stuff, nonetheless, I have to be there. I can't just sit in my room on my meditation cushion anymore. I have to be there.
Yeah.
for whatever reason.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Mhm. And I do Buddhist practice. I don't do, presencing Christ or anything like that. I do Buddhist practice. Mm.
Totally.
Mm. Yeah, so it is, for me, it's, well, multi-perspectival for sure, but in so many dimensions, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, totally.
And who knows? I don't even think we will ever be able to name all the dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me that's kind of like a project destined to fail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If we even try to name them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that what you just said is so important, actually, because I think for the most part of the metaphysical tradition, it's in a sense you would hit a kind of ultimate ground.
Mm-hmm.
For example, God,
Mm-hmm.
and then ultimately everything becomes kind of like is a revelation of
Yeah.
God or the
Yeah.
truth of God,
Yeah.
and so it is. So it is also with Plato. Even you have the idoi, and then all the idoi are participating in the idea of the good, and that's like the highest. That's like the ultimate ground. They're kind of like we can't go beyond that in a sense. And that's precisely the idea that it has been challenged and by Nietzsche and Heidegger, and also to some extent Buddhism,
Yeah,
because they would say
definitely.
this is completely inexhaustible.
Exactly.
So there is no final ground. It's always just this withdrawing off ground.
Absolutely. Yeah. That Mahayana practice. Yeah.
Right. Right. Totally. And it draws you in with a weird whiff of a promise. Right?
Yes.
Virtue of it drawing you in, right? It has this whiff of like it's promising something like the ground upon which to draw you in, right? Like it's so tricky.
It's very tricky. And every time you think that's the goal, you realize it's just a signpost. There's something beyond.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. So surrender. Did he send you something like a paper or something about it?
Like 3 pages, a kind of excerpt from I think it was a novel from Henry Miller.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you send us?
I could send it to you afterwards. Yeah, sure.
Cool. All right. So should you want to do that? Do you want to do take what you wrote and we go into philosophical fellowship?
Yeah. Continue on.
Sound good?
From where we left off last time? Okay. And we'll do a sit for a bit?
Yeah, totally. And then just go ahead and put so what we do is with the philosophical fellowship, what we do is we'll sit for 5 minutes, then we'll do, we want to just put it in the chat,
yeah,
right. We'll chant it. I think 3 or 5 times or something like that. And then we'll go into like 1 to 2 sentences around 2 or 3 times of that. And then we start responding to one another, but we stay in order and going around, right? Like 2 to 4 sentences. And then we go into dialogue about it. All right. So I will put the timer on. Yum. Okay, sweet. So I'll go 5 times. the chanting slow speech. I need to grab my glasses. Hang on. Humility is the virtue that allows beings' natural and inevitable collapse to transform into awakened formlessness and thereby free the world from its attachment to form. For Daniel, Sandra.
Humility is the virtue that allows beings' natural and inevitable collapse to transform into awakened formlessness and thereby free the world from its attachment to form.
Humility is the virtue that allows beings' natural and inevitable collapse to transform into awakened formlessness and thereby free the world from its attachment to form.
Humility is the virtue that allows beings' natural and inevitable collapse to transform into awakened formlessness and thereby free the world from its attachment to form.
Humility is the virtue that allows being's natural and inevitable collapse to transform into awakened formlessness and thereby free the world from its attachment to form.
Humility is the virtue that allows beings' natural and inevitable collapse to transform into awakened formlessness and thereby free the world from its attachment to form.
Humility is the virtue that allows beings' natural and inevitable collapse to transform into awakened formlessness and thereby free the world from its attachment to form.
Humility is the virtue that allows beings' natural and inevitable collapse to transform into awakened formlessness and thereby free the world from its attachment to form.
Humility is the virtue that allows beings' natural and inevitable collapse to transform into awakened formlessness and thereby free the world from its attachment to form.
Humility is the virtue that allows beings' natural and inevitable collapse to transform into awakened formlessness and thereby free the world from its attachment to form.
Humility is the virtue that allows beings' natural and inevitable collapse to transform into awakened formlessness and thereby free the world from its attachment to form.
Humility is the virtue that allows being's natural and inevitable collapse to transform into awakened formlessness and thereby free the world from its attachment to form.
One last round. Humility is the virtue that allows being's natural and inevitable collapse to transform into awakened formlessness and thereby free the world from its attachment to form.
Humility is the virtue that allows being's natural and inevitable collapse to transform into awakened formlessness and thereby free the world from its attachment to form.
Humility is the virtue that allows being's natural and inevitable collapse to transform into awakened formlessness and thereby free the world from its attachment to form.
Now, 1 to 2 sentences, evoking the essence so humility. There's something about this that's beckoning to die now.
How does humility help us to receive and heed that which beckons itself to us?
When I practice the virtue of humility, I transform that which is already dead into awakened formlessness and form.
The center of the rose folds and enfolds itself.
I sense a bursting, flaming through line that opens up with the enactment of humility.
Humility conquers death and ushers in resurrection.
Now we'll go into responding. We can respond to each other. still pretty short speech, two to 4 sentences, something like that. I'm just picking up on Daniel's awakening the through line. And just with this turn that happens, and precisely awakening that awakening will not be, right? Turns and awakens the through line running through.
Humility is in itself a turning. It's putting us into I'll just coin a word, turning the through line, or turning the through line, turning on the through line. Something's going on there.
And as we're moving through this, I see humility as a miraculous gift that we can enact in order to move the turning.
Something about humility that has an eye towards it opens to the most unopenable, and attunes, receives its attunement through that opening to the unopenable, that something happens there.
That's always coming up. The unopenable, the unhopeable. That which is beyond the world and at the same time at the heart of the world. What is that? That is kind of refusing all reifications, is pure refusal as such. What is that?
Humility attunes us to that place of wonder that is our home, our true home.
And there's something about that home, right? That that affords us to turn towards this refusal, right? This thing that refuses it. And the face of that refusal, its face, the refusal as such, like this kind of, in some sense, kind of opening your heart to the most disgusting fucking thing in the world, right? And staying open somehow is determining this thing about humility, right? Like this, watching. That movie, that director that did a series, I forget his name, but he did a series where it's all it is just images and music. It's called Samsara. And the thing is guttural, angelic music, right? Mm-hmm. Displaying these increasingly disgusting, grotesque kind of real things going on in the world. And those two things happening simultaneously. And it's this, there's a transformation that is a tension and a transformation that happens in that movie and acts with you that is transformative and makes, there's this kind of level of attuned humility and horror. That's also one, it's like that place where wonder and horror are so close, right?
Just to understand you, so humility is the virtue that brings us to a place where wonder and horror are gathered in the same and lets us also endure in that place. Is that?
Yeah.
I mean, I just thought maybe that's, well, I will dwell with that.
Through the virtue of humility, we come to stand in the place where nirvana and samsara are one.
And now, free speech. That standing, right, and oneness is so, it's occurring to me in this moment is so, whatever the opposite of static is, right? And that when you summarized, Daniel, what you heard me say, when you said it allows us to endure, the place where wonder and horror come together, samsara and nirvana come together and are one. That oneness, that enduring the oneness, I get images of like being humble in my life. Like, it's like if I think I get images of people and myself and pictures of being humble. that humility, in some sense, I don't necessarily see pictures of me necessarily being humble in the face of horror or something. I just see myself being humble, which tells me that there's something that humility also brings, that oneness to things. It's the surplus of awfulness, wonderfulness to things, right?
I I mean, I felt like getting sucked into um, some, right, there are these images, for example, like there's a story from a Christian monk or priest in the concentration camp in Auschwitz, and he traded himself for kind of a father, kind of like so that father was going to get into some torture chamber or something like that, and the priest just said, "Take me," and let him. And that priest endured in a kind of starvation chamber for like 10 days or so, like really long. And then they killed him with an injection. And now today there's a kind of a little altar there, just as a. But I was sucked because I've read too much about these things. When I was very depressed, I was kind of sucked into that space of imagination where you have like really the most horrifying things, and even within that locus, there can be wonder. Yeah. If it is enacted in a spirit of complete humility, a kind of super faith, when you have kind of cultivated that, and then there's really a coincidence of some samsara, this kind of wheel of suffering, and nirvana, and that is. I mean that was what Dogen advocated for in the Zen tradition. That kind of that nirvana and samsara are really the same. Something like the place where they really coincide. That is actually. And virtue is really, if humility is the virtue that helps us come to that place, that's just the most amazing, really, it's the most miraculous and amazing thing, I guess. That when you think, especially when you think about these sages who somehow could endure all of that and still, because in those camps, what happens often is that most people just throw away their morality. And that you can keep your humanity in those places is really, like Solzhenitsyn also writes about this. Usually only the very faithful can somehow survive and keep their humanity alive. And all the others are just, they can't. So, but yeah, I was drawn, or I fell into that realm within my imagination. So, but then humility is also the virtue that helps us to get in touch with that is most gracious in the human soul and the human spirit, I guess.
You can even see the gracious, like in some sense, the atrocity is so generous itself. Like, to kind of, like, you could even imagine in some sense this kind of, it's like this kind of evil can be so there's a generativity, right, that one can be admirative of, right? And at some sense, right, like that's I've been I've been I've been friends with that imaginal realm much. I've thought about that as well. And there's something about like there is something about humility. It does seem like it's the only way. Because if it's funny, I was like imagining um had this picture of, you know, if humility something like what affords us to be a room making, right? For the world, right? So there's kind of like even this, right? I'll it's like we could say my faith, right? I can make room for the worst and the worst and the worst things happening, right? This kind of room making capacity. So what the picture I'm getting as we're talking. So interesting
How
how dark things, where there's this dark dimension kind of showing up.
And when Daniel was using the word endure, I was thinking of when I'm sitting, I'm often in quite sometimes severe pain, and that's very present for me. And when I adopt an attitude of humility and surrender, it's the endurance is not endurance. There is not endurance, but there is a sustaining. Well, even the word faith is not the right word, but it's something like that. It's a sustaining sort of thing, and that's what I see as the essence of endurance. Endurance is more attached to my ego and my determination, and but there is endurance that is not attached to that. That when it is present, then there's no suffering. And when also just a while back when we were talking, I was thinking of the place where John got to, what is that moment to moment? What is that moment to moment? And that, I think that's what we are talking about here, actually, the moment to moment. When humility is present, that allows this moment to moment flow.
Yeah. When you went like that, like it was just really effective.
Of this moment to moment, and then
there's something about humility. Well, one, I really liked what you said is like there is this way where endurance can have this egoic kind of suffer through or something, right?
Yeah.
But then there's like what I think Daniel was referring to in the concentration camp, right? Of like the what did you call it?
Sacrifice?
No. I was saying the sustaining, right? How does one sustain their humanity through that, right? Like this sustaining aspect of humility, right? And then when you went like that, there's something about this humility that affords this confrontation, right? It is this I kind of got this sense of like this, like woken up to like every single moment is a moment such that the whole thing is right there, right? Like this. In other words, there's like not one moment that we're not talking about, right?
Exactly.
Like something about the moment that like, and There's something about humility that can wake us up to what is it of ultimate worthy of our humility, right? Mm-hmm. And there's something, I just got that, there's that kind of, that element to it, this confrontation. Mm-hmm. From what you said.
So that I see now, I see a lot of mysteries, but I will just name two. so first, Sandra, you mentioned this. What is this moment by moment by moment? Kind of what's mediating all of this? What's even mediating our there's some principle like the logos or the geist, the spirit. Something is, and somehow humility can come. Is the virtue that helps us to come into conformity with that non-being, that principle that we can never see because it's not a thing. And then the second mystery is that humility is not just helping us to get into that, what kind of enables every moment, and it mediates all the moments or gathers them together into some greater coherence. But it's also enabling that whatever collapses, to redeem that. These are like two mysteries, that there's whatever is collapsing is redeemed. That's also what I kind of was getting in the story that I remembered. Because there was that priest was not alone, he was with some others. And he was also able to kind of console them, kind of help them through doing his work as a priest. Because they all knew they were gonna die in a couple of days. So so in that sense, it's this. Then it's also this participation with this transfiguration of hell into heaven, which is kind of the message of Easter, if you believe it.
So I'm just kind of like, this dialogue is having me make sense a little bit more of my experience talking with somebody from Ukraine, right, who was talking about killing the Russians, like, you know, what it's like to kill, right? And that they will kill, and that they don't hate the person that they're killing. In fact, that they're killing with love. And I just remember just being like, just unable to respond right to that. But I something about what we're talking about here is starting to afford some kind of response in me to what I was, I think, witnessing there. Because even that sense of like, because I'm seeing, like, it's hard for me not to see that as and I think I did perceive that when they were talking, but it was so deep, I couldn't even, it just felt so inadequate to the matter, right?
Yeah. Reminds me of the Bhagavad Gita. Have you read that?
Yeah.
And Arjuna has
to. A long time.
Yeah. And also, W.B. Yeats had a vision of heaven as clashing swords and thundering hoofs, you know? Yeah. It's not a peaceful, sweet state. It's truth. So with that proposition, I'm not clear myself what the transformation is, because it is formlessness, but it's also form. It's both. It's awakened. Formlessness, form, you know? Yeah.
Really interesting. That ambiguity is precisely where we dropped into.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I would amend that proposition myself. To awakened formless form, or formlessness, or formless form, or, you know.
Form of formlessness. Form of formlessness.
Formed formlessness.
Form of formlessness.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's both.
Yeah, I mean, this is right. This is again what I said before with Dogen. We don't stop at nirvana or formlessness.
No.
We don't stop there.
Yeah.
We still go. We still continue.
We go on. We still go on.
We go on.
Don't attach to the unconditioned. Don't attach to the conditioned, but also don't attach to the unconditioned. You know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So interesting. I keep feeling so implicated in everything that we're talking about. Like, I keep putting myself up again, like everything you're saying, of just like I keep putting myself under some test.
Right? Oh yeah.
I don't know.
Tell us.
That's the way the understanding is placed for me. It's just this kind of sense where everything we're talking about, I see myself as the priest, and I'm like, could I do that? Right?
Oh, I see.
And I don't know. Like,
oh, I see. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like this kind of this. There's something about it that's very confronting.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also, what's interesting, but that's in some sense, this is interesting about maybe why it's a virtue, right? In this way, because what we're doing is we're making sense of it. Well, what is the way that, like, if you look at my experience of making sense with it, like, if we say that we make sense with it by conforming with it, right? There's something about the humility that's like, it's not light. Like, I haven't had any experience of like today being light necessarily, right? It's like, it's been more about this confrontation that comes with understanding humility, right? Like, you have to be confronted and be humble in some sense in understanding humility, right? So there's that process I feel like I'm going through here in talking about it.
And there's, again, I think if we consult the virtue of the body, when you just, humility is just you, and then when you bow down, it's not light. It's like you burden something is coming, and you're carrying something, you're lifting a burden. It's not like this. You're light. It's you have to shoulder something.
Yeah.
And what you have to shoulder is kind of like that ontological nothingness that is beneath every single ontic being, the nothing that always draws you to collapse, to dissolution, to just dissolving. That's beneath every single being. that's kind of the realm of death.
Yeah.
And life teaches us that. Life brings us the gift of humility.
Yeah.
In the face of the fact of our beingness and our collapse.
So Mr. Conformity over here is going to speak up. So like, I keep noticing there's this part like, yeah, but I want to know it opens back up.
You want to know?
I want to know that it opens back up.
Oh, I see.
I'll die.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll die and I'll lean towards dying. But I want to know that it feels good in the end or something like that. That strikes me as precisely not humility, right? Like
for the price of your soul, I will give you an assurance of that, guy.
But in some sense, what we're talking about is like, in some way, did the priest, like, did he know that, and did knowing that afford him the ability to keep his humanity all the way to the moment of death, right? Was it a know that it was going to work out, right? Or did he precisely not know?
Yeah.
Right. That's where the bite or the confrontation is, I think, that I'm.
And the true humility would be where if he didn't know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's part of humility, to acknowledge that you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, this is an old, right? This is a very old debate. I guess it's a mix of learned ignorance, kind of knowing of non-knowing, and faith, and perhaps in a very humble person, it's perhaps both faith and that kind of learned ignorance are. Because I think this is what we once in one of my talks with Johannes and John, the leap of reason and the leap of faith, perhaps also they are the same or coincide in the same. They point to the same.
Because I just went, my imagination just took me to another place of just like, well, in that moment of like wanting to know if it's going to work out, right? Just kind of in that moment it just struck me as like in that moment this moment is it working out. This moment is the working out. It already worked out. And this is this moment that it worked out. That's like, it's like, can I be with that? Right? Like,
moment to moment.
Moment to moment.
In places for 7 days, like all I can feel is pain. I know I'm gonna die by these people after 2 more days of torture. So, no, this is heaven. Like, I think that's probably humility. I think that takes humility, right? Like.
And also part of it is acknowledging your doubt and,
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Your humanity.
Yeah, it just seems like any kind of grip on any of that moment is like the opposite of the room making, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's kind of strange. I just keep getting the sense that on some level, humility releases, it's the releasement of myself, right? And precisely, it's like getting rid of myself in some sense, right? Such that something else, an acknowledgement of something else, right?
Yeah. To make room for that.
Yeah, totally. This negative capability, because that ability, right, to not grab onto something strikes me as just the greatest ability that anyone can.
Mm-hmm.
I start to feel pride for the amount of my humility.
I was just thinking how wonderfully humble you are, God. But it's true, isn't it? I mean, if you could do that, then you are free.
Yeah.
If you could, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. But now here's where I'm with is it who's the 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 Pure Land Buddhist philosopher guy? What's his name? Starts with a T.
Tanabe.
Tanabe. Yeah, Tanabe.
Yeah.
Where he's kind of, you can get this sense of this place of like the invisible other and the surrender. I can feel the dialectic of what we're moving through. Like I can get this part of it where it's like, yeah, there's a place where the capacity that I need is the need to not be this thing that needs that capacity.
Yeah. You
can kind of get this sense of like, oh, I need help here. Like,
yeah. So for the viewers, Tanabe has written this book, Philosophy as Metanoetics. It's one of the classics of modern religious philosophy in Japan. So yeah, but if you are brought to a state of utter humility where you see, oh, my self power is really now doesn't work any longer. Then there's this opening where suddenly you're tapping into the gracious, mysterious workings of other power, or Amitabha so Amida Buddha. That was it for the Pure Land Buddhists.
Yeah.
They kind of like.
Sorry, and that's why the practice, the embodied practice, is really necessary, so that, otherwise there's just complete dissolution of the self, and go crazy or whatever. However that shows up, but the embodied practice keeps the groundedness sufficient for this to work itself through.
Yeah. So maybe this is why we keep talking about pain. There is something about pain that's like, so in some sense, we're talking in some sense that this is the thing of the oomph around all of this turns, right? Is this sense of pain, and your in humility's relationship to pain, right? Which I think it's ultimately, like, when we talk about perhaps the most painful things that we can know are going to die, right? Like, it can be the most painful thing.
Yeah.
Like, at some level, you could almost say that it is the pain of all pains, like, right? To be
totally inescapable.
To be a being that finds it, right?
That actually every being, this is this great, that there's this so-called samsaric sea of suffering.
Yeah.
Every single being is thrown into that sea of in this inescapable rule or reign of death. There is no escape for no being. So, but then comes, of course, the self-awareness. Of course, That's the other part.
Yeah. Then there's the pain that we can just put ourselves through, and and even lie to ourselves about that we're trying to end the pain by making more of it, and like it's a whole tapestry of meta feelings about meta feelings about states and like that whole part, right? But then it's like it's really interesting. It's kind of like when it gets, and I've noticed this in working with people and circling. This happens a lot, like where a real true moments, right? Like are this kind of places where the person just gets like, no matter, there's this world of reaction and all of this spinning out and all this kind of stuff going on. And then there's these kind of moments where it's like, oh, you're in pain. Like, and everything kind of goes right there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's kind of like there's this transcendence, spaciousness that goes on when you acknowledge this just being a being in pain. Like you can feel it just when I say it, right? Like
exactly.
It resonates all the way down to your core with that sense that we can. And I think this is something about that from being with somebody there. What this side of it is like compassion. But what I think I'm hearing is humility for that person to be with it from their perspective is humility, right? That opens up.
Yeah.
Right. This, and I don't know if I've ever saw it until just now, this kind of relationship between compassion and humility is very, they're like this.
No, I see. Yeah. Yeah. I see. Yeah.
This has been really great. It's interesting because if I look at my kind of affective state, there's an ecstaticness that's present for me. And there's this, on some level, this awareness of something really, really intense. Like, but there's both this that and this ecstaticness, this relievement and this inevitable something or other. They're both in my kind of emotional state being here as we start to complete.
Yeah, and I feel really I wouldn't say like emotional ecstatic, but I just feel really grounded in appreciation and understand. Well, not even understanding, because it means I understand something, but it's not that I understand something, but I just feel grounded in a kind of open, non-knowing kind of knowledge, It's like, yeah, that this opportunity to verbalize and share and hear what is already here for me. It feels quite invaluable.
I think I feel similar to Sandra, and there's this mystery about the same, in which we continuously go into the same or meet in the same, where even the most opposite things like heaven and hell somehow can meet. Samsara and nirvana those things can meet in the same, and I'm still not quite sure what the same is. But we tap into that all the time.
We always seem to, yeah.
It's like it's like the through line of reality. It's holding everything together. At least that's what I got from my reading of Nishitani. It's like when we think, if that is really the logic of reality, then it's always where the opposites kind of like come together and we can deepen them. It's because they all the same is like the meeting point of all these things that can never be. It's like where even the most disharmonious things can come into can be gathered in the same. So that's strange. Same, yeah.
The same is not in any way unidimensional. It's so eternally multidimensional.
Yeah, like so much so that it even makes room for the idea that it isn't eternal. Like it's kind of like it's like so. And this has been present for me through the whole thing, is this kind of affect, this very intense affect of like not being adequate for the task, or for like not even the task, the same, I guess we could say. There's not being adequate for it, right? Like in this way that seems connected to the space I also feel.
Oh, I see. I see. I didn't understand that. Yes. Yeah. Thank you for that. That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
All right. Was there something that
I definitely relate to that.
There's something you wanted to read, Daniel, and then I need to wrap this up soon.
Yeah, I don't think I will find it. But there's a fragment from Heraclitus or Parmenides where it just says, wherever he starts, he ends up in the same.
Oh, yeah.
So like you always come back to the same place.
Send it to us when you find it.
Oh, I found it. No, I found it. It says it doesn't make a difference for me where I will start, because I will return to that.
Yeah.
So you always come back to the same.
That's great. All right.
Thank you so much.
Oh, this is great.
See you.